Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more slug testing. And I've got a pretty interesting one out here today, and it's one that several of you guys have requested, and it's one that I want to test out for myself and see what it might be able to do as well. I have some decently high hopes for it, but we know that this setup out here today has been very picky with ammunition, so we'll see what we can get through it. So for the load we've brought out here today, I picked up some of these, the Remington Premier AccuTip Sabot slugs. These are a 12 gauge 2 3/4 inch 385 grain Sabot slug, going about 1850, so they say, but I do have the chronograph, so we'll see how accurate that number is. And if you have not seen some of those slugs before, this is what they kind of look like. They have that really bright green plastic tip to them. They're really pretty interesting looking. And for the setup we're going to be running them through, like I said earlier, this has been one that's been pretty picky with ammunition, that being my Remington 870 Magnum Special Purpose. It has the 18.5 inch cantilever fully rifled barrel on it, and up on top is a loopholed VX1. So far, it looks like the Brennecke Red Magic Sabot slugs have been the best. I'll leave the card for that above here if you have not seen it. So I'm really curious to see what these Remingtons will do through a Remington shotgun like this. So as for the test, it's going to be the same as usual. I have the chronograph, so we'll be able to see what kind of speed we're running. We're going to start out by shooting the smaller target at 50 yards here. We'll shoot a 3-shot group there and see what we get. And then we'll move the target out to 100 yards and shoot another 3-shot group on the larger round target and see what we get there. So enough talking. Let's get the 50-yard target set up, take our 3-shot group, move it out to 100, take our second group, and then we'll come back here and see how they did. So let's get you guys a view of the targets and shoot these things and see what we might be able to get. Okay, so now we're back up here and let's look at our chrono numbers real quick. And we had some interesting results here. Now remember, the box was claiming 1850, and we very clearly did not ever see that on any of our shots. However, it seemed like most of the shots, except for this last one that you're looking at, were right around the 1,000 feet per second range, which I know we have an 18.5 inch barrel, so they're gonna be a little bit slower, but for this one, that chrono may very well have been reading the Sabot. I could be wrong. The chrono was only about maybe a foot and a half in front of the muzzle, so it shouldn't have made that much of a difference, but maybe it did. But in that case, I think this 1635 you're looking at right now on the last shot, I think that's what the actual projectile is moving, because I'm not zeroed for these rounds, and the rounds that I am zeroed with were right about 1600 feet per second, I believe, and we were hitting pretty well right on the money. So I think this 1635 is accurate for the actual projectile, and if that's the case, I'll put the numbers on the screen now for this number, what our energy would be and stuff like that. But if you want to include all the shots, I'll go through those and do the numbers for those as well. So for a high, we had 1635. For a low, it gave us 900, and that gave us an average of 1098. So if you would like to use that 1098 as an average, here are the numbers on the screen for that. But I think this 1635 is accurate for the actual projectile. So definitely moving slower than what the box is claiming, but we do have an 18.5 inch barrel, which is pretty much guaranteed to be shorter than what they used. So not entirely unexpected on this one. Okay, and this is the Sabot out of those slugs, and it's pretty much just a typical Sabot. Pretty hard plastic. As you can see, it opened up nicely there. You can see the grooves from the rifling in the barrel around these pedals, so nothing out of the ordinary to see here, and I definitely think it did what it was supposed to do here. Okay, so now we're back up here on the porch looking at our targets, and what we saw here was definitely pretty interesting. Now let's start off by taking a look at the top target up there, which is our 50-yard target. Now what we had for that one is we had a patch on this target. As you can see, there was a couple other holes in these targets that I just patched up for this test, and that first shot hit right there, just on the left of these patches. So we did lose one of our patches right in the middle, but that bullet hole right there that you see sneaking out to the left, that is one of the shots. Now the other two were actually in the exact same hole up here. I mean, it's almost a perfectly round bullet hole, to the point where I had to go back and just double check the footage, and it indeed absolutely goes through that top hole. So that's pretty interesting. That one right in the center, that was our cold bore shot. Our next two went in the exact same hole right there. So I'm going to measure the entire group, but you guys can decide whether you want to take the rounds going in the same hole as your group or if you want to take the whole thing. But let's measure the whole thing and see what we got at 50. Okay, so at 50 yards, it gave us a 2.44 inch group, and that is from the center of that hole as close as I can get to the center of those two up there. So definitely not quite as good at 50 as what I expected, but like I said, we did have that cold bore shot that hit different than the other two, so I'm leaving it up to you guys to decide what you want to call as the actual group on this one. But moving out to 100, this is pretty intriguing, especially for what we've seen from testing this shotgun before. We had a pretty decent looking group down here. Let's measure it and see, because I think that's probably the best group we've ever shot with this slug gun out at 100. So let's see what we actually got. Okay, so that 100 yard group gave us a 1.86 inch group, and that is from that bottom left hole to that top hole right there, center to center. So that is definitely the best group we've shot with that slug gun so far. There's no doubt about that. So looking at this as a whole, I'm really liking what I'm seeing here. I don't really have too many complaints about this one. That would absolutely be good enough to take deer out to 100 yards and stuff with. There's no question about that. So overall here, I'm really liking what I'm seeing, I gotta say. I had some decent hopes coming into it, but I think those rounds performed pretty well for us here today. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance? Like I said a second ago, that is by far the best group we've shot with that gun out at 100 yards. It has been very picky so far with ammunition, and I think we found a decent load here. Brennecke Red Magics were pretty good as well, but these outperformed it. So what do you guys think about it? Is that about what you expected? And if you've used these Remington AccuTip slugs, what has been your experience with them? Clearly, out of my setup, they do pretty decently. With that being said, we do also have an Instagram now, so if you would like to go over there and see some sneak peeks and things like that, the link will be in the description as always. And on that note, I'm going to jump back to doing a lot of testing for you guys. There's plenty more stuff coming, so stay tuned, and I'll see y'all in the next one.